Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It is Friday, September 27th, 2024. You are watching The Rundown, Episode 5, my weekly podcast where I talk about all things in the video game industry in regards to news, controversies, the list goes on. And boy, do we have a lot of that today. As always, I'm your host, Corrupt Ronan. And for today's episode, we got some stuff to talk about for sure. First off, we're going to talk a little bit about the state of play from PlayStation that happened earlier this week. Some of the notable games that were revealed there, and some of the, I guess, somewhat controversy that came out about that, about one game in particular. I got a lot to say about that for sure. So, well, like I said before, I am trying not to make sure these things go on rants all the time, but there's always something that happens that kind of sets me off in a way that I didn't realize the kind of stuff that would set me off until I started doing the solo podcast. But we'll talk about that a bit later. Then there's also the whirlwind, the tsunami of controversy and drama that's surrounding Assassin's Creed Shadows, and a lot of the recent happenings there as well. And boy, do I got a lot of stuff to say about that too. This might be a double feature in regards to what's been going on in the video game industry, and whatever. It's becoming a thing now where I just rant in all of these about specific topics, because perhaps that is a sign of how deeply passionate I am about this industry and how I would like to see it be better than what it is. So, I should probably say before I even get into this, and just thinking about this kind of threw me off my entire intro. But as always, if you're watching this on YouTube, do not forget to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed the podcast, as it does help me in regards to reaching a wider audience. And you show that you guys appreciate the episodes. I wouldn't be doing this if there wasn't an audience for it, I suppose. Truth be told. But without further ado, let's get into our first topic of today, which was the Sony State of Play that happened earlier this week. And they showed off quite a few games of note. I'm going to go to the page so I can show you guys some of these notable games. For example, you got games like A Midnight Walk, which has this Tim Burton-esque feel to it, which I thought was kind of interesting. There's a lot of games, but there's definitely a style of these games that people are kind of leaning into these days, which I think is kind of cool. Got to make sure OBS is still capturing that. Apparently, when I open up a different window, OBS just stops capturing the whole thing. It's probably to save memory, but who knows? They also show games off like the DLC for Alan Wake 2 that's supposedly coming out, which, truth be told, I have kind of lost all interest in regards to Alan Wake 2 after... To put it simply, I played through Alan Wake 2 multiple times. The first time I played through it, I thought, oh, this is actually kind of cool. I kind of like this. Then I played through it a second time, and my opinion slowly started changing about how I felt about the game and the way it was designed and its story. And by the time the New Game Plus, aka the final draft, came out, I was completely over the whole idea, and my opinion on the game completely soured. Topping all off to the fact that there's a lot of explanation about why some of those changes were made to begin with. But we'll get into that a bit later, as one of the companies that may have been associated with that is part of the larger discussion with the major topics I'll be getting into later. But then they also showed off Dragon Age, the Veilguard, which, if I'm going to be completely honest with you, it's still not selling me on it. Every time I see this game, it continues to push me further away from the idea of even being interested in it. Everything from the overall character designs to some of the story components, and it's a shame because this is like BioWare's major outing right now. And unfortunately, if this game were to fail, I could see this pulling BioWare down with it, which kind of depresses me a little bit as somebody who is a massive, no pun intended, Mass Effect fan. And I would love to have seen what they could pull off if they had gone back to their roots with the next Mass Effect game they're working on. But if this Dragon Age game fails, if it doesn't find the audience, if it doesn't sell, then we might be seeing the end of BioWare, which also in turn means the end of Mass Effect as well. Unless they sell the properties off to different companies or license them out to different companies to make games in these franchises and do a better job than what BioWare has done, I can't see any of these franchises continuing, which is really sad at the end of the day. But BioWare, as of today, is nothing but a Frankenstein or a shell of what it once was back in the days when it made games like the first Dragon Age and the first 2 Mass Effect games. Some would say they went downhill after Mass Effect 3, which I would kind of agree, but the barometer of how far they had fallen didn't really rear its ugly head until Mass Effect Andromeda. For those of you that know the "my face is tired" quote that people have noted that game for, and has been a meme ever since. So even with that, perhaps it might be best that they don't continue these franchises, or at least BioWare doesn't have their hands on it, but we'll see how it goes. If they can pull this around with this game, then we'll see what happens. But one of the things that people noted, especially throughout this particular gameplay demonstration, is people talked about the character designs and obviously the UI, which there may be an explanation as to why the way this game looks the way it does. As I mentioned during the State of Play, which you can watch on my YouTube channel, if you want to get my commentary along with a good friend of mine, who we kind of do this every time these events pop up. But one thing I mentioned in that particular video is how there was mention of the fact that the developers had collaborated with developers of The Sims in regards to the character creator and some of the UI design in the game, which when you look at the aesthetic and the character designs as a whole, it kind of makes sense in regards to the Sims team working on it, because there's definitely a lot there that kind of gives that feeling, I suppose, especially when it comes to body customization. The unfortunate side effect about that is that, well, you end up in a situation where you get a lot of these weird, I hate to call them, we'll call them baby face looking designs. I'm going to show you guys what that is in just a second here. Hold on. We're shot the image here. Where is it at? Here we go. There it is. That's the one. So you end up, what you're seeing here in this image is the race called the Kunari. On the right side of this image is what the Kunari looked like in Dragon Age 2. This is a character by the name of Arashok, I believe his name is. On the left side is what the Kunari looked like in Dragon Age, the Veilguard. As you can see, there is a stark difference in terms of visual style between the two. Now, obviously, Arashok was meant to look a little more rugged, hardcore, like hardened around the edges because of the kind of character that he is within the game in Dragon Age 2. However, the left side almost looks like a caricature of what that particular race is supposed to be. And people have taken notice of that. As you look at the character's face and the overall, visage of what this character's head looks like, it almost comes off as if they have some sort of weird deformity going on in their forehead, which is kind of what happens when you start applying these fantastical ideas to real life looking characters. This is the end result that you end up getting. And for a lot of people, this is incredibly off-putting. And I can't blame them for being put off by the whole idea, because it's not all that attractive looking. And that has been the common sentiment in regards to Dragon Age the Veilguard with its character designs. And for a lot of people, that has put them off, especially Dragon Age fans who have a general idea of what to expect out of Dragon Age. It has always been this somewhat grimdark-esque setting. And the Veilguard kind of threw all of that out the window for this almost whimsical look to it, which puts a lot of people off, unfortunately. But knowing that former people of Maxis worked on this game, like the director of the game, who goes by Corinne Bush, she used to work at Maxis on The Sims. And the idea of taking those people and putting them on Dragon Age, on surface level, sounds like a cool idea, especially in regards to the character creator, because the Sims games do in fact have very robust character creators, which you would think would be an overall positive for the game, as people do like having a lot of options when it comes to creating characters. However, the end result of that is what we're getting right now, what you're seeing in the picture on the left. And that is not the only picture of things looking like that. There are plenty of pictures out there, especially of the Kunari, specifically of the Kunari, and how deformed they look because of this particular new style. And people are just not having it. At the end of the day, people just aren't having it. So we'll see what happens. Like I said, there's a part of me that hopes that this game's quality can move past its rather off-putting character designs, and that it ends up being a success and kind of brings BioWare back to its glory days in them crafting great stories with great gameplay on top of that. But time will tell. Like I said, I would hate to see BioWare go under because of just the poor decisions that they have continued to make since Mass Effect Andromeda. Mass Effect Andromeda, Anthem, which ultimately ended up being a game that failed because of how incomplete it was, how a buggy, broken mess that it was. On top of the fact that it was a live service game and a time period where people were slowly starting to burn out on that. That didn't reach critical mass until relatively recent, but the idea of them doing that when people just wanted to see them make great RPGs was kind of it was like a shot to the ribs, truth be told, and that sucks. They've had quite a few failures on their hands, and I don't think they can afford to mess this one up. Hopefully they don't, but we'll see. Other games of note for this whole thing. We're going to scroll down to they showed off a bit more of the Monster Hunter Wilds thing and obviously more of the Dynasty Warriors games and stuff like that. But also there was a sizzle reel that showed off a little bit of Metal Gear Solid Delta, which I thought was kind of weird to have that shown off in more of a sizzle reel, considering that people, that game's supposed to be out this year, right? And not a lot of people have seen that. But the most notable thing at the end of this whole thing was the surprise reveal of Ghost of Yotei, which is the successor / sequel to Ghost of Tsushima. But one thing that caught people off guard and caught people's attention is the fact that you are no longer playing as Jin Sakai in this game. You're playing as a character by the name of, what is it? I gotta go back over here. Hold on. It goes by the name of Atsu, who is a female Ronin. Also, take note is that this game takes place 300 years after the events of Ghost of Tsushima, which means that obviously that Jin is long dead by this point. And then this game takes place obviously in Yotei, which is the mountain in the region at the time, which was known as Ezo, which we now know today as, in Japan, as Hokkaido. So this was before Hokkaido became Hokkaido, but it takes place within that region. Seems to kind of be, from what I've heard, it seems to be kind of encroaching on the end of the samurai era, where a lot of the Western influence came into play. So by the end of the trailer, you kind of see her using a lot of different weapons, and the kind of sound off into the trailer is her using what is a musket, which is kind of what, the Western influence of that era for Japan, essentially. The response to this whole thing has generally been positive from what I've seen so far. However, that is not to say that it has all been sunshine and roses. As there has been some form of drama popping up about this whole thing that I've seen as of late. And truth be told, I think it's kind of justified. And this is the part where I'm kind of going to go into a bit of a tirade on this. I got to a point as I was putting the notes together a couple days ago. I realized that I should probably start writing this stuff down precisely to get my point across, because I don't want to get to a point where I didn't want to get to a point where I got to the episode and then completely forgot all of my important points that I wanted to drive home in this particular episode. So let me explain exactly what's going on here and why people are kind of apprehensive about Sucker Punch, this new Ghost of game, and why. So while people are willing to give the game a chance, there's still a level of apprehension surrounding it. And I would argue, especially after the events of the past few years, I mean, hell, even the past few months alone, is justified. The past 6 months have shown that gamers are tired of the heavy-handed political messaging that attempts to appeal to the modern audience. The attacks from developers for even the slightest bit of criticism, the swapping of races and genders, and the intent of characters with reckless abandon, the being talked down to if you're straight white or male, even worse if you're a straight white male, the admission from developers themselves that they want to erase white people from the industry. So much so that if your game even has a whiff of DEI from it or any of its developers, it's an immediate pass. Because all the actions that the gaming industry as a whole has made over the past few years alone has made the gaming community extremely and hypersensitive to woke as a whole. And honestly, I can't blame them. And while Sucker Punch as a studio may not have a history of such conduct yet, people have dug into both the model actress that they're using for the main character, which is Atsu, and the director of the game, which they found tells a very different story. Especially their social media accounts, which basically raise every red flag of the very things that many within the gaming community have developed an intolerance for. And again, I can't blame them for being that way. Not because they're racists, bigots, or transphobes, but because they've been burned one too many times for even attempting to give this stuff a chance. Remember what I said a few episodes ago. Once is an accident, twice is coincidence, 3 times is a pattern. You know, one of our greatest strengths as a species is our pattern recognition ability. And truth be told, the past few months alone have shown enough patterns that the gaming community can tell when and how a game will fail. And to the uninformed, to the people on the outside looking in, this pattern recognition will seem like clairvoyance. But outside of this, there is a subset of people, myself included, that wanted to see Jin's story continue. Though for me personally, I'm not all that surprised they went down the new character / female character route. Ghost of Tsushima being one of my favorite games of 2020. In fact, I have a video of that on my channel right now. And because of that, there is a quote in that video that I want to point out to for the reason why I had an idea that this was going to happen at some point. In that video, I said, and I quote, and some people might disagree with me about this depending on how you feel about the original game. Granted, me saying this does not mean that I hate the first game. Like I said, it's one of my favorite games of 2020. The one thing I pointed out in the game's story that I felt was an issue to me, and I quote, I said, unfortunately, our protagonist isn't the most relatable character. I would even go so far as to call him two-dimensional, angry or stoic, more the latter than the former. It's the characters around him that give him any reason to show more qualities than the two you normally see. This changes Ghost of Tsushima from the story of Jin Sakai to the story of Tsushima Island and its people. There were moments throughout the story where I started to feel as if one of the characters supporting Jin was originally the intended protagonist instead of Jin himself. The characters surrounding Jin have far more complex histories and motivations that drive them. In retrospect, I realized I even had more of an attachment to Jin's horse than the man himself. Now, for those that played the first game, there's one character in particular that I'm referring to, and you might be able to piece that together for yourself. But there was part of me that was hoping that they could add a bit more depth to Jin as a character and explore that more in a true sequel than to completely throw him to the side as a character, to which will likely be relegated down to him being either an honorable mention in the story or him having a major influence over the world at large. And they talk about the things he did post the events of Ghost of Tsushima, which we will likely never see now because we're playing a different character. But regardless, I am still looking forward to this, as I love the first game. But like the rest of the gaming community, I am cautiously optimistic about this. And again, I can't blame gamers for being cautious about this because they've been burned a lot. Where they see things like this coming from either the people that work on the game, the characters that breathe life into the actors that breathe life into the characters of the game, I understand where it's coming from. I can't say they're wrong. They're not wrong for being apprehensive, especially with where it comes from, especially the history of this kind of stuff happening in the industry, the patterns that people are seeing. So we'll see what happens. I'm hoping the best for the game. Truth be told, I'm hoping it's good, and I'm hoping it doesn't have too much of what people would call woke inside the game. But when you look at the people that are behind it, it almost seems inevitable that at some point it's going to have a very heavy-handed dose of the very shit that has caused a lot of recent games to straight up fail. And that would suck. Anyways, moving on from that. Let's see what's going on in the chat real quick before I move on. Depends on whether, I guess Fancy must have typoed here from autocorrect. She meant to say Yotei instead of whatever that other word is. Depends on whether or not Yotei is close to Tsushima. We'll see what happens. But again, this game takes place 300 years after the events of the first game. So whatever happened with Jin, the man is long dead at this point. And whatever he did post that first game, that is, yeah. You're probably going to be hearing about that more so than seeing it. And that kind of sucks as somebody who would have liked to have seen them develop Jin as a character and flesh him out to give him more dimensions. And when I say dimensions, I don't mean turn him into a blubbering, crying fool all the time every time something bad happens to him. I think that is also very off-putting for a character. I meant giving him more dimensions than just being angry or stoic or the I'm here to save the world aesthetic that he kind of had in the first game. They kept touching on this idea of a darkness that was hidden within them, but by the time you finish the game, none of that really ever comes to pass. That idea is never really explored that much in that first game. And I feel like that's a missed opportunity, especially with the way that first game ends, or at least depending on the ending you choose. And the idea that we're never going to see the side effects of that and experience that or even play that kind of sucks. But we'll see. Moving on. Our next bit of news here, which is another, I guess I do have a rant about this particular topic, but not without reason. Our next major topic here is the Assassin's Creed Shadows drama. And man, oh man, is this a never-ending tale of nonstop drama surrounding this game. So news came out this week that the game had been delayed until February of 2025. This news hits after the somewhat bizarre timing of a controversy that stemmed forth from a figurine that they revealed. And that figurine, oh boy, that makes people upset. Give me a second here while I pull that up. Let me show you guys the figurine I'm talking about. Give me a second here. You might have saw a brief snippet of that when I accidentally hit that image on stream, but I'll show it now. Here we go. So here's the figurine that they showed as promotional material for the game that you can pick up. Now, for the uninformed, you might look at this and think, "What's wrong with this?" I don't see anything wrong with this. It's the character Yasuke and Naoe. They're both on there looking like Funko Pop ass figures, which I wonder if this isn't a Funko Pop thing. I don't think it is, but they sure look like it. However, I want you to take note of one very important aspect here. The broken Torii Gate. Now, why is this important? There is a shrine in Japan known as the Sano Shrine that is famous for its broken Torii Gate. They call it the one-legged Torii Gate. The reason why this shrine is broken is because this shrine is located in Nagasaki, Japan. For any history buffs out there, you know that Nagasaki was one of the targets of the atomic bomb that was dropped on Japan during World War II. The blast, the force of said blast of atomic bomb, damaged the Torii Gate at the Sano Shrine. As you can see here, this is what's left of that shrine because of the events of World War II. So you can see how this would stem controversy. as this particular instance of this broken torii gate has a historical and cultural significance. So much so in Japan, they decided not to repair the torii gate, but to leave it as it is. And as you can imagine, the Japanese are not very happy about that. As you can see here on this Twitter account I pulled up from a Japanese user, what they say, and this is roughly translated from their post, says, please spread the word Assassin's Creed Shadow figures from Ubisoft, a famous Japanese hate and criminal company. A figurine of a destroyed torii gate has been released, which is believed to be based on the one-leg torii gate that was destroyed in the Nagasaki atomic bombing. That's from Japanese people. And what's weird about this, to make this even more damning, is, well, whatever. I'll get into that a bit later. I can't. I gotta move forward. We'll get into that a bit later. But recently there was a video that came out by a YouTuber by the name of Legendary Drops. In that video, he talks about how he had a conversation with a lot of Ubisoft employees talking about the direction of the company and why it is they seem to be missing the mark constantly when it comes to their products, the gaming community as a whole, and, well, in this case of Assassin's Creed Shadows, being offensive to an entire culture of people. In that video, one of the devs called out management by saying that the management has been writing a lot of this criticism off as, quote unquote, a toxic and loud minority of gamers, and that the outrage behind a lot of what's been happening is all made up. But let's not just hear that from me. Let's watch the video and see that for ourselves, shall we? Make sure I got the volume turned up for this. Hopefully you guys can hear this.
They responded saying, at a high level, they rarely talk about it. At a
Because
project
apparently I
level,
can't.
they brush it off as toxic
Because apparently
gamer
I can't
talk.
hear it. Hold on.
As Asmongold correctly pointed out in a video of his, Ubisoft is filled with toxic positivity that prevents any growth. I then asked, what about the Japanese community's backlash over Assassin's Creed Shadows? It's obvious that they haven't done their research, and even the smallest details are going to be noticed by a culture that's as proud as the Japanese. They responded by saying that the criticisms haven't been talked about, and they've only issued demands that we mustn't engage with discussion on that topic publicly. They responded saying, at a high level...
So wait, you hear that, right? They've had no talks about this, apparently, according to them, and that they've been encouraged not to engage with it at all, period. And this seems to be a very common sentiment coming from the general gaming space, not just Ubisoft. This idea, as you see here on the screen, that the company's filled with toxic positivity, which is a very similar case to what happened with a game like Concord, where the studio itself was also filled with this toxic positivity. Basically says this is why they've been avoiding the Japan setting. If I recall, and this is me trying to really dig back into the far recesses of my mind when it comes to things that I've heard about them avoiding the Japanese setting. I recall, and maybe this is my mind, perhaps, the Mandela effect, right? Make my mind making this shit up and it never actually happened. But I recall hearing or seeing an article asking about why they hadn't done the Japanese setting way back then. And I remember hearing or seeing something about them saying that that making a game take place in Japan would be too easy and too on the nose, and that they wanted to explore the possibility of making Assassin's Creed games that take place in other settings first before jumping on the Japan setting. Again, I could be completely making that up. That article probably doesn't exist. It's probably my mind just making that shit up, but that's what I recall hearing at one point in time. This was many, many years ago, before all this shit started happening. But it would make sense, or at least it does explain, Why we've gotten so many other games in settings, even settings that don't even make sense for an Assassin's Creed game, before we ever got the obvious setting that makes the most sense for an Assassin's Creed game. So that's what I believe is what the case is. Again, this is just me pulling this stuff up from the recesses of my mind, and it's been so long that I could be completely misremembering that. I could have completely have made that up in my head. I don't know. So take what I'm saying in regards to that with many grains of salt. I don't know why, but I recall hearing something like that. It sounds like an excuse to me. Hey, I'm not saying it's not, but that's what I recall hearing. So the end result of what happened here is that right after the controversy went down, the timing of this is really strange, but also really convenient for the fact that this controversy came out about the Torygate shit. And then following that immediately was them canceling their Tokyo Game Show live stream and also canceling the Access Media press events that they had to give, Access Media early copies of the game to the previews of the game. They canceled all of that shit immediately. And then followed that up with announcing the delay for the game being all the way until February of 2025. Now, some people have speculated that they're doing this intentionally to have the game release in time for Black History Month, which is what February is. Which would almost be an even bigger insult considering you added considering one of the biggest controversies about the game is the fact that you decided it was okay to throw in a black samurai and claim that he was an actual person an actual samurai that existed in Japan at that time, when there is nothing, absolutely nothing, proving that he was. When most people, when it comes to Assassin's Creed, waited over a decade for them to finally make a game that takes place in Japan because they wanted to enjoy the cultural side of things, the aesthetic, because obviously people wanted to play as Asian characters in an Asian game. Surprise. But instead of simply doing that, you decided you were going to turn that idea on its head by adding a black character as a samurai. And what makes this worse too, especially during a time period where there is some rumblings, if you listen closely, about, unfortunately, racism between black people and Asians. And the first thing that you decide to do is make a game with a black man running around killing a bunch of Asians. Just top shelf stuff. Top shelf stuff from Ubisoft. And what I find ironic about all that, whatever. Okay, I'm gonna get into my longer rant about this. I do have a lot to say about this shit. So hold on. Again, I had to write this shit down because a lot of this was on my mind at the time. So let me go over here real quick. So what the hell's going on? Basically, this is well over a decade of the company and its leadership completely ignoring the gaming community in favor of having their heads stuck up their own asses. Even the people working under them, the employees, are seeing this and are just as frustrated as we are. A few things, for example, the person claiming that the Japanese aren't offended or concerned. Yeah, that person is a former Sweet Baby Inc. employee by the name of Kazuma Hashimoto. Take note, because truth is, much of the makeup that is Sweet Baby Inc. are former Ubisoft employees. Take note of the CEO of Sweet Baby Inc., Kim Belair, and her infamous quote from GDC 2019 talking about terrifying marketing teams. And I'll show you that right now. Hopefully you guys can hear this too. I gotta pull this up. Hold on. Time out. Technical difficulties. Time out. I had this pulled up. I hate the way OBS tends to capture this stuff sometimes. It's really annoying. But we do it live. Here we go. This is Sweet Baby Inc. CEO Kim Belair in regards to consultancy firms to tackle sensitive topics in research.
If you're a creative working in AAA, which I did for many, many years, put this stuff up to your higher-ups. And if they don't see the value in what you're asking for when you ask for consultants, when you ask for research, go have a coffee with your marketing team and just terrify them with the possibility of what's going to happen if they don't give you what you want.
That particular quote has been making the rounds well since March of this year. Because people have caught on to what Sweet Baby Inc. is, what they stand for, and let's just say things haven't been pretty ever since. Now, I could go into a whole tirade about Sweet Baby Inc. and how this whole thing kicked off to begin with, but unfortunately, I don't have a lot of time for that here. I would like to do a dedicated episode where I can kind of talk about that stuff happening right now, but unfortunately, I don't know when I'm ever going to have the time at this point. But back to the main topic at hand. What's permeating all throughout Ubisoft can honestly be extrapolated to the broader AAA gaming space. This idea of playing it safe out of fear of offending some group of people, or sanitizing your game so much that they become a shell of what they once were. An empty product that the consumer isn't allowed to ask questions about, just consume. Why did we add a black character to a game taking place in Japan? Don't worry about it, you bigot, you racist. Just play the damn game. Or if you don't like it, don't buy it. As one Sean Layden said about Ghosts of Yotei when people were questioning what happened to Jin. Which the whole don't like it, don't play it thing, as of late, has proven to be a death knell for a lot of games as of late over the past few years. That's the kind of thing you don't want to say, because it turns out the people who don't like it and don't play it are a significant amount of people. But this constant preaching about how video games are meant for everyone and made by everyone, but anyone with a lick of sense about markets and understanding target demographics will tell you that trying to make something for everyone ultimately results in something made for no one. But what's even more damning about all of this, I'm going to show you guys here in just a second. What's even more damning about all of this is this particular clip right here.
Go have a coffee with your marketing team and just terrify them with the possibility of what's going to happen if they...
Let me stop that real quick because it's not playing the right sounds. That's what happens when OBS doesn't work as intended. Hold on. Jesus. Okay. Now I got to fix that too. Hold on. I like how I decided to play that one again live when it shouldn't have, but go figure. All right. We're good now. Let's go back to that, shall we?
For their developers. What happens in practice is that they essentially push out senior engineers, promoting junior engineers to senior roles after just a few years of experience, oftentimes with experience in just one engine. Meanwhile, experienced developers with far broader skill sets are being overlooked. This constant cycle of turnover with inexperienced leaders leads to noticeable drops in quality, with bugs appearing in their games. The passionate, dedicated developers leave, while those who are just going through the motions stay behind. This doesn't just affect the technical quality of their games, but also impacts the design and creativity. For instance, you'll find designers working on FPS mechanics who have never played an FPS game before, or engineers who don't understand how the mechanics they're building are supposed to feel. There's a lack of passion and skill across the board, and the results are obvious.
That in itself is incredibly damning, but it's not the first time that I have heard something similar to that, where you have people that are working on these games or mechanics in these games like a first-person shooter, for example, who has never even played or even worked on a first-person shooter before. Yet somehow they're working on one. And you can't figure out why the quality of these games is suffering in the process when you keep pushing out senior talent in favor of people that have no idea what they're doing. Nor have the experience to even understand that. But I'll give you another example of this. A few months ago, there was a tweet by, well, not 3 months ago. This tweet came out years ago. People pulled up a tweet from a developer working on Halo. Okay? And I got to pull this up because this kind of lends credence to exactly what's been going on. And the reason why I say this whole idea of having people work on things that shouldn't be working on them can be extrapolated to the entire industry as a whole. Let me get that for you guys. Hold on. Here we go. This is it right here. Let me make that bigger on screen for people that needs to see it. Hold on. There we go. Now, this guy, Nick, is a developer that works at 343 on Halo. And he says, I honestly don't think I could work on a game that glorifies or fantasizes modern guns, Call of Duty, Battlefield, Rainbow Six. I've had moments I've struggled with Halo. But the weapons and world are completely sci-fi, which creates a large enough separation for reality. In other words, this person hates guns. But they're working on a game where you shoot guns. Where the entire gameplay foundation is based off of the idea of you shooting shit. And you can't figure out where the lack of passion for these projects is coming from. And again, for the people that I'm showing here, like, it's even ridiculous that I even have to say this, but do not go after or harass these people. It's not worth your time. It's not worth the energy, and nothing good comes of it. I'm only showing you the stuff to illustrate a point. So, back to the main point at hand. While this topic is about Ubisoft, and it's clear getting the wrong people for these jobs runs rampant throughout the industry, hold on a second, I got to move this over here. There we go. Otherwise I'm hurting my neck. But in a world where games are becoming more expensive to make and more expensive to buy, it becomes very easy to burn a customer after they spent nearly $100 on a product. And in return, what they receive is a half-finished, broken, buggy mess, however, that also contains messaging about how bad they are as a person for simply existing. I said it before and I'll say it again. These wounds, especially for the entire industry, and not just Ubisoft, are self-inflicted. Which is the reason why, when you look at the fall of Ubisoft, especially in terms of their market value, you look at Ubisoft stocks. I was watching a video of somebody who's been monitoring their stocks, right? A little over 5 years ago, Ubisoft stocks was about 90 euros per share. Today, their stocks are 9 euros per share. Over the course of 5 years, they have lost 90% of their value. 90%. This company is on fire and is in constant free fall. And the investors are not happy about this. In fact, with all of this fallout, they had an emergency investors call, which is unsurprising, obviously, considering there's been rumors of a hostile takeover for quite some time, and that the investors are kind of rallying together to do so. But one of the key points in this investor call, and whatever, I'll just show it. I'll just show it to you guys. Sometimes it's better to just show and not tell. So I'm going to do exactly that. I really wish the clips function on YouTube wouldn't autoplay when you don't tell it to play. Now, this is from the investors call. That this was an emergency investors call that happened not but a couple days ago, by the way. And this happened right after the cancellation or the delay of Assassin's Creed Shadows to 2025.
Welcome everybody, and thank you for joining the call on such a short notice. Our second quarter.
The person you hear right now is Guillermo, the CDO, president of Ubisoft. Who's talking to investors in this call right now.
Fell short of expectations. Turning to Star Wars Outlaw, portion of players have expressed dissatisfaction, notably on stealth mechanics and overall polish. I want to reaffirm that we are an entertainment-first company, and our goal is not to push any specific agenda.
Now, I want to stop there because I want to talk about that specific point he just made. We are an entertainment company, and that we are not trying to push any specific agenda. This coming from the company that recently launched a female and non-binary only mentorship program. This coming from the company that gave birth to a consultancy firm that have been on record saying they want to eradicate whiteness, quote unquote, from gaming. Do you honestly believe that people believe the bullshit about you not pushing an agenda? When you have an entire department at your company based solely around the whole idea of DEI, which people would argue is perhaps the agenda in itself. But you're lying to your investors by saying that you're not trying to push an agenda? And it's very clear that some of these investors are kind of informed about what's been going on, as you'll see as I continue this clip. What you're hearing next is the voice of one of the investors.
Ghost of Yotei, so the sequel to Ghost of Tsushima, looks an awful lot like Assassin's Creed Shadows. So is there a risk that you start bumping into that one, that people will not buy Shadows?
On the competition related.
Let me just stop it there. Whoever this investor is, they're evidently well informed, because they're aware of Ghost of Yotei, and they're also aware that it is in fact direct competition to Assassin's Creed Shadows. But let's continue.
To Assassin's Creed Shadows, the focus is really to make sure that we deliver a fantastic experience in a setting taking place in this feudal Japan that should be really enticing.
Everybody,
as you notice, he gave what could only amount to a non-answer to his question. He didn't have an answer to that. It's like, what are you going to do to entice people to buy this game over Ghost of Yotei? No answer. It takes place in feudal Japan. It's Japanese setting. No answer to that whatsoever. All this is to say is we've reached critical mass in regards to Ubisoft. And it is unfortunate to watch this company fall as far as it has. Yeah, Japan equals enticing, apparently, at least in this particular call. Equals win. Yeah, that, and as Fancy said, like, a lot of this stuff is typical corporate bullshit. And it is. It definitely is. But the problem now is that a lot of these investors are becoming aware of this stuff now. Like, it used to be a case where investors didn't really know what was going on, or at least have a gauge of the temperature of the general gaming community and the market. So it's kind of the reason why these studios and publishers have kind of gotten away with what they have for so long, is because the investors weren't really aware of what was going on. But what we're seeing here is that some of them are starting to become educated on what's going on, and they're calling them out for it. So what ends up happening here? Well, they're at risk of a hostile takeover. What can end up happening is that, a firm takes over. They end up selling the company and selling all the IPs that it had to different studios and publishers that might want to take a piece of the pie. Honestly, considering what's been going on over the past decade in regards to Ubisoft, that is the best case scenario. Now, also following this it was said that Ubisoft was launching an investigation within the company from the board of directors. The irony about this is that the board of directors are all part of the Gilmo family. And boy, oh boy, wouldn't it be ironic if at the end of this investigation, they turn out that Ubisoft has no wrongdoing. Listen, we lost an investigation and we couldn't find any wrongdoing here, so from a board of directors that are also in league with unbelievable. Unfucking believable. But they're not trying to push any specific agenda, anything like that. No, not at all. They're listening. They're an entertainment company first. That's all they care about. Meanwhile, you turn into a blubbering, stuttering mess the minute you have to face your investors who are questioning what's been going on and your ability to lead the company. But again, this is not just a isolated Ubisoft issue. I can imagine that you can extrapolate what's happening here to the broader AAA gaming space as a whole. This particular video is from an investor call, an emergency investors call. That happened, let's see, the date on this is what, the 25th? So yeah, just 2 days ago. This happened just 2 days ago. Yeah, like this shit is serious. That's how bad things have gotten. This shit is serious. But in my last bit of news here, moving off of this, there's been a rumor floating around that Rocksteady might be potentially working on a new Batman game. Obviously, take this with a grain of salt because it is, in fact, a rumor. And I find it strange for them to be doing this or jumping right into this, considering they've already been hit with a wave of layoffs after the disaster that was Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. Does it reek of desperation? Absolutely. And I ask the question, whether or not you can even trust Rocksteady to make a new Batman game after them basically making it pretty clear where their opinions stand on Batman at the end of the Suicide Squad game. Can you trust them to make another Batman game when all the talent that made the original trilogy amazing left a long time ago to form a new studio away from Warner Brothers? Now, obviously, it's Batman, so I can imagine people's eyes completely glazing over once they see a new teaser of Batman beating bad guys' faces into a pulp. But I'm not too sure that's enough for me. The nightmare that is Suicide Squad was enough to show me that the Rocksteady that I loved is not the Rocksteady of today. It's a shell of its former self, filled with people that have no respect for DC, its heroes, or its villains. Now, could this be a remake? Sure. But could you even trust them with that? Considering the disdain they wrote in for Harley Quinn when reacting to her old nurse outfit from the first game. You think you get that design back in its truest form? Absolutely not. It would be one thing if they just missed the mark with Suicide Squad. But they didn't just miss the mark. They missed it and then turned around and viciously, deliberately pissed all over the entire legacy that put them on the map as a legendary game studio. So if this rumor is true and they hit us with a teaser, I can't imagine that teaser not being met with a collective meh. I'll say once again, these wounds are self-inflicted. You can sit there and talk about how gamers are bigots and racists and transphobes, run the whole gamut down that list. But the reality is that all those labels are starting to lose their bite because they're being thrown around so recklessly, so needlessly, without any thought whatsoever. So you can call them all you want to. It no longer has any effect. People have stopped caring. when I said that the layoffs and the negative aspects of this industry were going to continue, it will. And it's going to continue until someone gets it through their heads that ignoring your customer, shitting on your customer, calling your customers bad people to their faces does not result in sales. And that the intolerance to someone's politics also doesn't translate into sales. This will continue. It's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. It might be a long while before it gets better, unfortunately. But again, these wounds are self-inflicted. I remember talking to someone on Discord, I think it was Raikou on Discord, saying that he kind of felt bad for everybody piling on Ubisoft in their time of, well, sinking, effectively. And in that particular discussion, I said, I would feel bad too. But they kind of brought this on themselves. You think back to the time when Assassin's Creed Unity came out, and the game was an unoptimized, buggy mess, especially on PC. And when gamers called them out on that, their response was, well, if our game's not running right on your machine, I don't know, get a better machine. Get a better computer. Or when people started questioning the idea of your game costing $70 and you justifying that by saying, oh, well, this game is a quadruple A game, not a triple A game, so the price is justified. I'm talking about Skull and Bones, by the way. Or even worse, when one of your representatives talked about how gamers should get used to not owning their games. You have well over a decade of that kind of behavior, Ubisoft. So no, you're not going to get a whole lot of sympathy from people at this point. Especially not from the people that you have shit on and called bad people since the very beginning. And I feel bad for some of the developers in there that are actually seeing this shit and hoping that something changes, but can't do anything about it because management won't listen to them nor to the customers. You want to know why a game like Concord ends up being the way it is when nobody's listening. When criticism goes completely ignored or is not allowed to even be mentioned because of this culture of so-called toxic positivity. There will be more Concords in the future. Perhaps not the exorbitant price point that Concord was, but there will be more. This idea of, oh, well, we don't want to appeal to the male gaze. The male gaze is terrible. The male gaze is evil. The male gaze is misogynist. You go ahead and tell that to the people that are, to this day, still playing games like The First Descendant, which that game in itself is the male gaze personified based on their definition of what it is. Or a game like Mecha Break, for example, which also appeals to that, which has, in its beta, far surpassed that of Concord in its beta alone. Or you look at games that don't appeal to that, like a Black Myth Wukong, for example, that just recently crossed over 20 million copies sold. But you're so caught up on this idea of trying to remove whiteness and the straight white male from video games because you think they're the majority demographic. Meanwhile, the stats and the numbers are telling you a very different story. Sleeping on the amount of impact, grunt, wherewithal that the Asian market actually has. So until they start understanding things like that, this is going to continue. And it's not because of the attack of gamers that's causing it to happen. Again, these wounds are self-inflicted. And when these studios get shut down and employees get laid off, there will be a lack of sympathy or even empathy from the gaming community because the people within these companies decided that it was a good idea to take their ire out on their customers. But anyways, that's all I got for now, guys. It's about time to bring this thing home. Obviously, you can tell that I'm quite passionate about this subject as somebody who really does care deeply about video games. And I have, as somebody who has noticed this cultural shift, but has also been burned by projects in the past that have gone down this route of heavy-handed political messaging. What set me down this path was, well, as I mentioned in this video, Alan Wake 2. And how I went from liking the game to absolute apathy about that game. As somebody who loved the first game. And I couldn't understand how they went down that route with the second game. Having played it through 3 times to realize just how much I didn't like that game. And then the shit with Sweet Baby Inc. happens to find out that they also worked on Alan Wake 2. And it explains so much about that game. Especially the shit that I did not care for. People keep saying the go woke, go broke thing is not legitimate. There's no correlation there. Which may in fact be true. Perhaps this is all coincidence that games that have gone down that route have all been universally panned and have flopped. Minus Baldur's Gate 3, which is an anomaly in a situation, which a lot of these people like to point to and say that as disproof of the go woke, go broke thing being true. That's only one game. Meanwhile, you've had a list of games that also followed that same path and didn't do so well. From Alan Wake 2, that still hasn't recouped its development costs over a year since that game is launched, to the failure of Suicide Squad, Concord, Star Wars Outlaws, and now Assassin's Creed Shadows. If you want to continue to put your head in the sand, that's up to you. But it will be your own fault if your projects fail. But okay, I'm out of here for now, guys. Thank you all for watching. Perhaps, perhaps I'm off the mark with all this stuff. Again, this is me just throwing my thoughts out there, in my opinion. And I imagine some folks might disagree with that, which is totally fine. But let me know, if you're watching the archive of this, let me know what you think in the comments below. I do read comments. As some people would say, to that reading the comments is kind of a mental suicide. Yet I still read the comments anyways. So, let me know what you think in the comments below if you're watching the archive of this on YouTube, obviously. And leave a like and subscribe if you did enjoy it. And thank you to all that watched the episodes live as well. I do these live, usually on Fridays. And yeah, a lot of these past few episodes have kind of turned to me just straight up ranting about the industry. And I didn't think I would be this impassioned about this stuff until I started writing information down for news for these episodes and took a minute to step back and really think about how I felt about this. Take a step outside of the box that is the general inside of the gaming industry and look at the way people are looking at it from the outside and the way gamers are feeling about it. And instead of simply attacking them, calling them racists and bigots and things like that, taking a minute to think about where this stuff is coming from. Nancy says in the chat, But yeah, that last point, if you have a political agenda, that's fine and all, but it's hurting your sales. It's tough balance. It is. But a lot of the mistake that people are making in regards to this is that they're thinking that the majority of people that are on their side, or the majority of the customers that buy their products, are on their side. And the reality is, they're not. There are a lot of people out there that are kind of in the middle, sitting on the fence about this stuff, right? What you end up doing, especially when you have heavy-handed political messaging, especially those that lean in the idea of white people equals bad, quote unquote, you're not going to bring people like that over to your side. You're not going to convince them to fight for you. No, they're going to go to the other side now because they're realizing that all you have to say is about how bad they are when they've done nothing wrong. You don't win people over like that. You make the mistake in thinking that everyone is on your side, and the reality is that they're not. There are a lot of people that are in the middle, and a lot of people that just want to play a good video game and want to be left alone. And I would argue that the fact that people are willing to give a game like Ghost of Yotei a chance, even with all the red flags that are surrounding the game, its developers, and the model or actress they're using for the game, people are still willing to say, you know what? I'm willing to give this a chance. But they are cautiously optimistic about this game. And like I said earlier, the game even has a whiff of that shit in it. It's going to get dismissed. Because the amount of people that have pushed and driven people to this point by calling them bad people for not always agreeing with everything they have to say or put into their games, you have made the entire gaming community hypersensitive to this shit. And that's not the gamer's fault. That's yours. And the harder you push, the harder it's going to push back. Some would say the pendulum is swinging back in the other direction, and it probably is. That's where the cultural shift is coming from. But it's swinging back hard, and it's taking no prisoners. And this is not the result of gamers. This is the result of your actions. Social media links are in the banners below. If you're watching on YouTube, they're in the description section. They should be, at least. I'll try to get. I'll see if I can get. I'll see if I can get timestamps on this as well. I know this is a longer episode compared to my usual one, so we'll see how that goes. And I'll try to get some clips out of this as well. I'll try to post that up on YouTube for those that want more short form content. But again, thank you all for watching. Thank you all for tolerating me rambling on about this shit. As I can't imagine people not getting tired of this stuff at some point. But who knows? We'll see. Like I said, let me know what you think in the comments below. I do read comments. But that's all for me for now, guys. As always, you all have a wonderful day or night, depending where you are in the world. You all stay classy, stay sharp. Don't do anything that I wouldn't do, and I will catch you guys in the next episode. Guys, have a good one. Love you all. I'm out of here. Deuces. And fade to black.